status of the account. So with these, the most important ones now, they're going to use, unfortunately, they're not the same. They're going to use different numbers, which mean different things. So as we look at it, the first one, when we look at status of the account, is going to be 0 is one of them. And 0 just means that it's too new to rate. So you'll see that sometimes, or it's paid off.
And this is for Equifax?
Equifax, yes. Equifax. 0 is too new to rate. When we look at 1, that means current. Remember last week on the other report, C is current. So 1 is current. 2 means they are 31 to 60 days late at the time of the loan application. 3 moves to 61 to 90 days late. At the time of the loan application. And then 4, we're moving up, 91 to 120 days late. 5, your consumer is rated at paying over 150 days late, typically 5 or more payments. So 5 is 150 days late. And then you go into 7. That means they're making regular payments. Maybe they've made some, talk to their creditors and are working on some type of payment plan. So 7, making payments. They're trying to get out of their debt, possibly on a reduced schedule. 8 is repossession. This refers to an auto loan. So 8 is repossession, and 9 means it's charged off to bad debt. The lender has written it off as an uncollectible debt. Now, just as a word of caution, sometimes you'll see on a trade line it will say I installment 8. No, it means it's an installment loan for the I. And the classification of the account is 8, repossession, because car loans are an installment. So that's easy to figure out. You have a repo. But sometimes it might say I-9. When you see that, it may not say repo. But if you don't recognize the name of that lender, you need to ask the consumer, tell me about this loan. Because if it's an auto loan, you have a repossession. It just won't say it, but it'll be an I-9 charge-off. So lenders do the same thing. If they're not sure, if it says FMC, who knows what FMC is? We have to talk to the lender. That could be Ford Motor Company, installment, charge-off to bad debt. It is a repo. So you have to watch, so sometimes you may overlook those. And that will change the whole dynamic sometimes of the transaction when you find out you have an I-9, okay? So that happens to do with status of the account. Now the other thing is your Ecoa codes. If you remember, and this is in section 15, this will designate who's responsible for repayment of this account. And this is where Equifax won't use numbers, they use letters. So I is going to be individual. J is going to be joint. That is a joint account with a spouse. We'll always designate joint. A is authorized user. If you remember, this is somebody who's authorized to use a credit card, like maybe their parents, but they don't have to make the payments. They just get to use the card when necessary. So authorized user. And then we're going to have C and M. So C is going to be your co-maker, and M will be maker. And these will designate on the account who's responsible. These will be people other than spouse. So it'll have a designation. Maker would typically be the stronger of the two. Someone has better credit, maybe higher income, and the co-maker would be the person secondary. So typically that could be a parent, child, boyfriend, and girlfriend. They're not married, so it's not going to show as a joint account. Okay? So that's just the different designations between who's responsible. And as part of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, they need to report these to the right designations as to who's responsible. And report to both parties' credit bureau as well equally. So let's go to the next page, which starts out our credit bureau. And as we look at it, if you remember, the name of the score in Equifax is called Beacon. And their Beacon score is 577. And it gives us a little bit of a message. There are some serious delinquency issues and possibly public records. So we're going to start to just dive into it and take a look at their credit. And this is where credit score is important, but we need to really do some more research to see exactly what's going on, what's driving the score to be where it's at. So as we look at it, Section 2 is your safe scan warning. If you remember, that's their fraud prevention service, which goes in and verifies data, like Social Security numbers, trying to prevent the use of fraudulent information. So if we have a fraudulent transaction, we'd have to stop and be able to clear some of those issues up if they can be cleared. If not, we wouldn't proceed with the transaction. This one is telling us that the address is associated with more than one Social Security number. And of course, it suggests that we do some thorough verification. Typically, the system will give you some challenge questions to see if the customer can answer those, and we can release some of those red flags and make sure we can verify the customer is who they say they are. And of course, as we go to Section 3, it just tells me the approximate date that the Social Security number was issued. And it was issued in the state of Michigan. And of course, it just lets us know we pulled Equifax, and it gives us, of course, their address and telephone information for future reference if needed. But as we go into it and look at the consumer or the customer's name. Now this is where Experian, or Equifax, sometimes you'll have to put a ruler there, a piece of paper, to read through, because everything's kind of jumbled together, as you can see. So our customer just happens to be John Q. Consumer Jr. That is his name. And in Section 4, this says that he's been on the credit bureau since 3 of 1982. So that's when he's established credit. And this one just lets you know in Section 5, where it says FAD, is his most recent activity on the credit bureau. And Section 6 just refers to internal numbers for the credit bureau company, FN 238. But as I break it down, under the customer's name, I have the address. They live at 9412 Main Street. And as an F&I manager, I should be comparing that to what's on the credit bureau as well. And maybe even cross-reference their driver's license, just looking for making sure that everything compares and lines up. Because remember, we're responsible for checking and looking for red flags, the possibility of or existence of identity theft at our dealership. Says he lives in Atlanta, Georgia. It was reported in 7 of 2000, and it just happens to have their telephone number. But as I look at below, I see their prior address, and this is what I would compare to the credit application. It should be close or similar to what they've stated, 410 Orange Grove Drive, San Jose, California, and your dates, reported in 6 of 99. Prior to that, where did they live? Detroit, Michigan, and it sort of matches where the Social Security number was issued. That was reported in 3 of 96. Underneath here, it's telling me my customer is also known as, it's an AKA, he is known as Jack Consumer or Quincy Consumer. And if you remember, some customers use their middle names for their first names, and sometimes it creates a file variation if they go pull credit and use a nickname instead of their full name. Or you could have a file variation in the event that a customer has legally requested to change their name, which can be done, or they've been married, divorced, and remarried. there are some specific reasons that are valid why you have AKAs. We just have to do our homework and talk to the customer. Now underneath there, BDS means birth date of the subject. So the consumer's birth date is 3/3/1961, Social Security number. But now Social Security numbers will not identify all the digits. Typically it only gives us the last 4 to help protect their identity as well. And it says the Social Security number has been verified, meaning in their system they have run it through their data check. Now Section 8 tells us his employment. And the last time credit was pulled, the ES, employment of the subject, he's an engineer with Central Power in Atlanta, Georgia. And we have the corresponding dates. Section 2 is his former employer, which he was an engineer at Acme Manufacturing in San Jose, California. It is kind of matching up to his residential addresses as well in the time frame. And his second former employer is Major Motors in Detroit, Michigan. Matches he was in Michigan prior for his address. Now as we go to Section 9, this is just going to break down a summary of their credit. It's just a quick summary at a glance to let us know what's going on with their credit. So we can see that credit, we've got a summary as early as 7/82 to the most recent through 9/01. Next to that it says PR/OI. PR means public records. OI is other information, typically information coming from other third parties besides Equifax. So as we look at it, we've got, it says yes, we have public records, and FB is no for information coming from third parties. But we will have to identify the public records in a minute. And it happens to say that their accounts, these are trade lines, they have 7, and the high credit HC goes from 450 up to the highest of 160,000, probably some type of mortgage. And this just gives me the history. They've had 4 ones, and ones are current. We like to see that. We have 1-2, which means at some point they were 31 to 60 days late on a particular loan, and I have 1-5, which is 150 days late or more. But I will find that as I go through the trade lines. Again, it's just my summary. Now, number 11 is the inquiry alert. It just shows that there's been 3 inquiries since that particular date in 6/01. Yes?
Right where, excuse me, under the summary where it says history DEL, is that like stuff that's been deleted?
No, this is history of delinquencies, typically outside of, when we get down here, this 24-month summary. Yeah, because usually there's things that happen prior to the most recent 24 months. Okay, so as we go down, we've got 3 inquiries. Section 12, it says public records or other information. Sometimes this area gets looked over because it's sort of not really bold and it's kind of all scrunched in together. So make sure you check that. And we have a public record, 7/98, and it says BKRPT. If I'm not sure what that means, I will go to this other glossary and look at public records. Section 12, BKRPT is a bankruptcy. So we know we've had a bankruptcy. And as we look at, our job is to see what type and the status of the bankruptcy to see if we can proceed. So we can go in and look at the court subscriber's number. We have our case number. We have a filing date, liabilities. They owe $25,600. Their assets were $10,500. Looks like something was exempt. It's an individual, personal, Chapter 7. But it says dismissed. And if you remember, dismissed is where they've gone to the courts and asked for bankruptcy relief, and the court system has dismissed the case without relieving their debt. So they're still responsible for it. Now, typically in subprime, if it's been 12 months or more, lenders will look at it. If it was a recent dismissal, They won't. They want to have at least 12 months has lapsed since they tried, because they have 180 days from the dismissal to go in and try it again to get it right. Now, the next one says, 5 of 98, we have one of the packets we just handed out will be the steps. Everything is in here that you need, all the formulas. We tried to do this to keep you organized, and so we'll go through it together, but it will just say what to do on each step, and as we go through, it has areas in there, how to budget. It has the lender guidelines listed. It has the formulas for calculating selling price, budget ratios, advance calculation, max car payment, max amount financed is in here, mileage grid for used cars, and even your student loan table that we may use to budget student loans as well. So everything's in a simple packet, and these are just samples of the formulas. You don't want to use these for your transaction. Just use the worksheet that Zia passed out as well. So let's look at our first customer, Simon Feldman. It's actually Simon and Sarah. And let's take a look at the credit. The first thing that you would do as a desk manager and or F&I is look at the credit app salesperson gave us and make sure there's nothing missing. So as we look at it, do you see anything missing as you start to eyeball the credit application?
Date of birth.
Yeah, Sarah doesn't have a date of birth. We might want to know if they're married. I think they are. They did some of these accounts joint. They've lived at their address for how long?
6 years.
And the requirement, 6 years, 2 months, and subprime is 1 year at current address and or 3 years in the state and 3 years of trackable addresses. We look pretty good. They're stable. They've been there 6 years. We have 2 references, and we happen to have his employment. He works for Ed's Deli, and he's been there 3 years. Requirements are 1 year at current employer, 3 years of employment history, and a permanent W-2 employee. And he's a manager. He makes $1,800 a month. Sarah works for Boston Market. She's been there 5 years. So they have both good residence and employment stability. Sarah makes $2,600. I'm going to ask them 2 things about their income. What do you think that would be?
Gross.
Yep,
And
gross.
is there any other additional income?
Absolutely. Is this your gross monthly income, and do you have any additional income that you'd like to include that is verifiable? So total, they make $4,400. We know where they rent. I don't see the last car financed. If I don't see one in the bureau, I will ask them if they've ever financed a car before. But I think we're good with both residence and employment, as well as they have signed the credit application. Let's take a look. We've got credit bureaus on the next page for Simon. And he's got a credit score of 567. We'll go through this in a minute and just dive through his. But we have Simon's Experian, Simon's Equifax. We have to merge them together. And then we have Sarah's Experian and Equifax. And the last page in the packet tells us what kind of car they are looking to purchase. It is a used Toyota Camry. Last page. Is it a Camry? Yeah, right here. Yep, used Toyota Camry. It has a wholesale book with all the ads for equipment and mileage. Will be $12,882. We own the car for $11,800. Remember, that's just the dealer's cost. And the money down is also listed back there is $1,500. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do, if I pull and look at this sheet for desking, and I'll look at it, and we just did the first part. It says review the credit application. Second part, what does it say to do, Jay?
Merge and budget the credit bureau.
Okay, so if I need help, I can refer to the first handout, number 1. And it tells me how to budget different items in the credit bureau. So I'm just going to keep this aside as I go down. You'll need a pen and probably your calculator, and we're just going to go to each of these items on Simon's credit. Now, as I look at Simon's credit, he does score a 567. One of the first things I look at as well is how long has he been on the bureau? And I can see that in the profile summary. Towards the right column at the very end, he's been on the bureau since 2004. We definitely have some depth in our credit history. So he would meet those requirements of being on established credit for 5 years. My score is 567. It looks like I have a public record. It is something in Glendale Municipal Courts, filed in 9/30 of 2014. I've got my subscriber number for the court system, and he owes Norwest Financial $1,000. And the type of public record is a CIVCLJUDG, civil claim judgment. How do I budget judgments? Regardless of age. So 3% of 1,000 is how much? Okay, write in 30 to the right and circle it. Because remember, we're figuring out their total credit payments. So we can look at debt ratios going forward. So $30 and circle it. Okay, let's go down to the trade lines. First one, I see the subscriber is Nordstrom's Credit. It is a charge card. It says revolving. And who's responsible? One is individual. Opening date 2/09. Amount type, so the balance or the high credit was 826. The balance is currently 826. And payment level date is 10/16, so this is definitely less than 2 years ago. It's a charge-off. So I budget charge-offs how?
3%.
If it's,
Balance
yep,
is less than 2 years.
less than 2 years old. So the balance is $826 times 3%. And what will that give us?
$24.79.
How much?
$24.79.
Okay, $24.79. If it's over 50 cents, round it to 25. So write in $25 and circle it. Okay, B of A. It's a revolving charge card. Who's responsible? You have a 1. Individual. Charge card had a $300 limit. It looks like they charged off $184. 12 of 2014 shows a charge off. Is this less than 2 years?
No.
No. So put a line through it and write old next to it. You don't have to budget it. Old. We have another B of A. Charge card revolving. Sometimes you can check the account numbers to make sure it's not a dupe, which will be listed underneath, and it's not. They have the last 3 digits are different. Oh, we have a charge off of $1,270. Payment level date 4/16. Is that less than 2 years?
Yes.
We budget 3% of $1,270.
38.
Okay.
Rounded up to 40.
What did you get? 38 what?
31.
Okay, if it's less than 50 cents, you'll round down. So you'll go to $38. So write in 38 and circle it.